So my wife and I finished up a session with a counselor and walking us through different aspects of our marriage, different aspects of life, different aspects that we were engaging in. And through the course of those conversations, there were moments that I had to get very open. There was moments that I had to be honest about certain things that were bothering me or how I felt or how I interacted. And there was moments that I felt like I had to kind of like reveal different aspects of myself that weren't comfortable, weren't easy. And as we continued through the session, as we wrapped it up, the counselor looked at me and he said, I really appreciate everything that you brought to the table today, everything that you tried to go through, because I could tell that you were being vulnerable. And he said, I think that was hard for you. And I was like, yeah, it was really hard. Vulnerability sucks. How often does vulnerability in all of our lives something that is very, very hard to tap into? If you don't know who I am, my name is Ben Taylor. I run Raw Motivations, and I'm a self-aware narcissist. I'm a person who has destroyed and damaged multiple people, multiple lives. I'm not proud of the things that I've done, but the past no longer defines me, and it's developing me into the person I am today. And that's the person who's on this platform to bring awareness about narcissism, healing, growth, and change to people out there. So as I work with people on one-on-ones and coaching sessions to try to help them break free of their trauma bond, to detox from their narcissist or their toxic person through the limbo land and develop growth and continue focus on their vision, their values, their goals, that's my purpose of being on this platform. And sometimes people ask me hey, how can you be a narcissist because you're being vulnerable? Narcissists aren't vulnerable. And that's true. And there's a period in my life where I was never vulnerable. I was invulnerable. And the idea is, even with invulnerability, it's actually negating the fact that you can never find secureness. You can never find protection. You can never find peace in that, because it negates that by being so invulnerable that nobody truly knows you. There's a lot of people out there that think that they fall in love with a toxic person or a narcissist, and they're very confused about how that love looks or how that love feels. Well, in reality, you can't truly love someone until they're truly known. The hard thing is, a lot of times a narcissist or a toxic person won't let you actually tap into that, won't let you actually know what's actually there, what's actually true, what's actually underneath the surface. And so they hide it with lies, with manipulation, with gaslighting, all that kinds of stuff, to be able to hide the true self, to be able to hide the shame, to be able to hide the guilt, to be able to hide what's truly going on underneath the surface. I know that firsthand because that's what I've done a good 30 years of my life, of dealing with narcissism, of dealing with aspects of it, of dealing with lying, of gaslighting, of manipulating other people for my purpose, for my gain. And it's not who I want to be. Over a period of time, I started to realize, as I became self-aware about narcissism, I got to a place where I started realizing, okay, I need to cut the lies, I need to be honest. Got that. But then the next aspect of actually being vulnerable about what's actually going on. Vulnerable about what's going inside. Vulnerable about the shit that I deal with on a day-to-day basis, whether that's in my head or whether that's in my personal life, of how I'm interacting with friends, whether that's how I lead as a father, how I interact as a husband, or how I interact with work, or even on coaching calls. And in working through this, realizing, hey, vulnerability is such a key piece in this aspect of change. And I realized that vulnerability is needed for change. Because if I can't be vulnerable with my therapist, if I can't be vulnerable with my wife, if I can't be vulnerable with myself, then there's an aspect of living life in a blind reality that I'm never able to know where I'm at, so I'm never able to know where I'm going. Imagine taking a look, someone handed you a map, and they said, hey, I need you to get to point B. And you're like, that's great, but where's point A? Where are we starting at? And a lot of times with narcissism and with people trapped in narcissistic fog and narcissists in general, they don't acknowledge and they don't understand where they actually are. So as a result, there's no place to get to the place where they need to be. For me, I started realizing that key, that road, that journey had a lot to do with vulnerability. Sometimes it feels hard to even say the word. Because vulnerability is not something that I'm programmed with. It's not something that I want to have. It's not something that I want to share. But I realize every single day, being on this platform, interacting with coaching clients, working with people to get them from point A to point B, that I have to bring my full self to the table. And a lot of times that means I need to pull out my vulnerability. And again, like I said, that sucks. I don't like that. It's not easy to be vulnerable. Probably one of the biggest resources that was utilized in my life to be able to learn about vulnerability was early on, as I was just starting to uncover and start to learn just like the few strains of narcissism. But really, I started learning about vulnerability first. What first kind of brought me up to speed a little bit on vulnerability was the book by Brene Brown called Daring Greatly. If you guys haven't read it, it's a great read. But the tagline on it is how the courage to be vulnerable transforms the way we live, love, parent, and lead. And I started realizing that there's no way that I can change unless I start using vulnerability. There's no way that I can actually acknowledge where I am until I start getting vulnerable with the actual shit and mire and muck that I'm in to figure out how I can work my way towards healing and happiness. And that's what I've been working on. In Brene Brown, she describes vulnerability as the idea of uncertainty and risk and emotional exposure. And that's something that as a narcissist, I don't want to show. I don't want to show it on my videos. I don't want to show it on live events. Like, I don't want it to show. But there's an aspect that if I don't show that, if I don't have people understand who I am, what I'm struggling with, how I'm growing, how I'm changing, then it just looks like another mask. And I'm not on here for masks. If you guys have watched me for any period of time, you know I'm honest and you know I'm on here and I cut straight to the point. I try not to have a bunch of fluff in the things that I say. I try not to have a bunch of fluff in how I communicate. And if you've ever done a one-on-one with me or coaching, you understand like, hey, I'm going to tell you how it is. Whether that's in a one-on-one individual or whether that's one-on-one with a couple, I'll flat out say like, hey, like if this abuse keeps happening, like you need to leave. Because I believe you need to know the truth and you need to hear it very clearly. Because a lot of times people don't see where they're at without hearing the truth very, very clearly. And that's why I'm on this platform. Awareness, growth, healing, and change. That's why I'm on here. Vulnerability is that topic that I never want to approach, I never want to look at, I never want to show that vulnerable side. I never want to show the chink in the armor. I never want to show the aspect of where I feel shame, where I feel blame. And for some people, they might think like, oh, he feels that in just this one area. I feel in all areas. I feel in areas of how I lead my daughter. I feel in areas of how I lead my wife or interact with her. I feel that shame in who I am as a person. I feel that shame in where I've become, where I've come from. I feel that shame in the people that I've hurt. I feel that shame in the business ventures that I've lost or have wasted money. I feel that shame in the idea of guilt of failing. Of failure on an investment, of failure on a business venture, of failure in how I've lived. And that vulnerability piece just feels really awful. And it feels really hard. True vulnerability comes down to the fact that it's based on truth and it's incorporated with change. Because as I become more vulnerable, as I bring my full self to the table saying, hey, this is who I am on these aspects of life, on every aspect of life, this is who I am, this is what I struggle with. It doesn't feel easy. And it takes courage. And a lot of times it's not what I want to come to the table with each and every day. If you guys have interacted with me on one-on-one, a lot of times I end up sharing a little bit, whether that's more of my story, whether that's more of another person's story. But in working with people in coaching environments, like my goal is to meet you where you are and work to establish clarity in your situation so that you can find healing and change. Like my job as a coach coming into someone's life is to say, hey, this is where you are. This is point A. You might be thinking you're farther along, you might be thinking you're farther back, but this is point A, this is where you're at. Let's find the tools, let's give you the tools, let's give you the coaching, let's work on it to get you to point B. And as I talk to people on session after session, working to get them to a place where they are moving from a state of vulnerability, understanding where they actually are, to a state of empowerment and change, it's amazing to see that light change, that fire ignite back in them. But we can't get there unless you're willing to be vulnerable. I can't get there unless I'm willing to be vulnerable. Vulnerability is something that everybody appreciates when they see it in someone else, but it's super scary when they have to step up and actually communicate in a vulnerable way. That's what I'm on here to do. Awareness, growth, healing, and change. If you're interested in talking with me, click the link down below in the bio. Subscribe to the channel, just because I've got a lot more videos coming, a lot more videos in the past. Follow me on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook. Would love to have you interact with some of the small snips of a good check-in point for you to be able to hear truth throughout your week. Or check us out with the podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Anyways, thank you guys so much for hearing just a little bit about vulnerability.